In my previous video of Name the Trait, I mentioned that the question is silly because it is a loaded question. The question presented infers the fact that no one in their right mind would agree on. That it is the traits that makes a human have value. I do not agree with this assertion, as I think humans always have moral value, and that animals do not, independent of their traits. Let me explain. Do humans have value that animals do not? Yes, of course. If we propose a trolley problem, where a trolley is going to run over a random animal and a random human, and you could save one, which one would you save? Remember, you do not know anything about this particular animal, and it might be a mosquito, a spider, or a cow. You also do not know anything particular about the human, as it might be a child, a woman, or an old man. It stands to reason that the worst outcome is to let both beings die, and that the answer to which one would you save should, obviously, be the human. I can't think of any reason why this would not be the case. Some vegans may argue that if the choice is between a puppy and a serial killer, then it would be better to save the puppy. But the way the question is framed removes any personal reasons, since you have no idea of who or what you are saving. With this example, it is easy to demonstrate that humans have, in general, more value than any other animal. But what if we change the problem and, again, you have a random human or a random animal that you could save? But, in this case, you also know that the human has a 0.01% chance of already being dead. Meaning that even if you choose to save the human, there is a 1 in 1,000 chances that you end up not saving either. Would you still try to save the person? Again, I don't think anyone in this world who isn't a psychopath would save the animal instead of the human. What if the chance of the human being dead is now 1%, 10%, 50%? Would anyone not try to save the human, even if it means there is a 99.9% chance of that said human not being able to be saved? This example can be expanded forever. What if the human had a disease that would kill them in 50 years? Again, I believe that no one would save the animal instead of the human. What if this disease would kill this person in 40 years, 20, 10 years, a week? What if it was 2 animals versus 1 human? 5 animals, 10, 100? As long as we do not consider any external repercussions, such as environmental disasters that may also affect other humans, or personal perspectives, the choice should always be obvious. You should always save the human. Now, if you agree that humans have value, and that value is so high to the point that we should always, in all variants of the previous problem, choose humans instead of animals, then what is the trait that gives humans such value? And if you accept that humans should always be the priority, the question no longer becomes about a metaphysical sense of morality, but a practical one, which is health. Is killing and eating animals beneficial to humans? This makes the question of name the trait moot, since if it is beneficial to humans to consume animals, and giving priority to humans is moral, then consuming animals is moral. Now, let's ignore what I've just said and accept that humans indeed can lose moral value when a certain trait is removed. We say yes to the first question, and there is a point in the trait equalization where value is lost. The question, do you know what that point is? And the answer being no, does not lead to a reduction to absurdity. There is a point where the being in the trait equalization is no longer human, and therefore loses its moral value. Now, identifying that trait might be impossible. Some people call it the unnamed trait. And this is the point where, in my previous video, I mentioned the example of the sheep of Theseus. An easier example to understand is probably the grains of sand and the desert. A grain of sand is not a desert. 2 grains of sand are not a desert. At what point does adding a single grain of sand turns a pile of sand into a desert? We know that at some point we will consider it a desert, but that exact point is impossible to state. No grain of sand makes a desert. Another example is a famous painting such as the Mona Lisa having value. If Da Vinci would have not made his last stroke of the brush in this painting, would it still have the same value? What was the stroke that made the Mona Lisa valuable? If I keep removing strokes one by one, at what point would you say that the painting no longer has value? If you can't answer that question, should we then attribute the same value to the Mona Lisa and a blank canvas? Simply because you cannot point to the exact grain a pile becomes a desert. That does not mean that one and the other have the same value. Simply because you cannot point to which stroke does a painting get its value. That does not mean that the whole painting loses its value. Simply because you cannot point to the trait that makes humans valuable. That does not mean humans lose their value. And because we established that humans indeed have value over animals, then name the trait makes no sense.